Okay, so the title of this talk is The Long View of 2024. And if you will see that 2020 is a major focus there, and a lot of this focus is on the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions, the larger and the smaller cycles. And I'll start off by a brief quote. I'm paraphrasing the American historian Arthur Herman. I was struck recently. He said that something like it was difficult for historians, even historians, to predict history. And I was thinking, wow, if you really study astrology and astrological or planetary cycles, you can predict the trends of history. And you'll see how I do that with these Jupiter-Saturn cycles, the larger and the smaller cycles, particularly when they are in a certain element, and then when they change elements. So this is my original research, not that any astrologer couldn't have come up with it. But you'll notice the asterisks on certain of the conjunctions. And what I've done is said that certain conjunctions that's right. The first one, thank you. The first one in 61 of this core cycle. And I say core because all of the, with one exception, one anomaly in 2000, all of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions are in one element. And in 1961, February, it was Vargotama, the first Navamsha of Capricorn, making it very powerful. Then another category you have is if the conjunction is at the solstice, the equinox, or the galactic center, which is what we had in December 21st of 2020. And that gives also extra power to that particular conjunction. Yes, big one right there, which we are still right in the midst of. And then the third category that I have delineated as extra powerful, and that is what we had in 1980-81, when you have the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction occurring 3 times, usually within the same year. Okay? And actually, the 20th century was pretty amazing in that way, in that we had 2 sets of triple conjunctions, and it made that century very, very intense. So we see that they all 3 were in Virgo, actually in Hasta Nakshatra. And so Hasta, of course, is the hand. Virgo is ruled by Mercury. And so we had what I call the information age and this kicked off these, in my mind as an astrologer, this triple conjunction kicked off the information age. You have the cell phone, you had the internet, you had laptop computer. In other words, all these things that could be held in the hand, or internet, facilitating the handheld use of portable devices, okay, for communications. So what I'm going to do next, Sunil, if you could, I'm going to look at a larger picture. If you could give us the larger cycles, I just want to point out the different, this is the one from 1400 to 2400. So this is showing us all of this, by the way, sidereal Lahiri. So this is the larger cycles. It's they're kind of greenish. It's a greenish one. 1400 to 2400. You see that one there? Yeah. Great. And maybe pull that out. I don't know if you can you see my pointer or no? You can't see it on your screen when I point?
No.
Yeah, okay, that's par for the course. Okay, so these are graphs that this one I made in 2016. Actually, I conceived of it and my gifted webmaster executed it. So I've been using these slides for several years and I hope to include them in the second volume of In Search of Destiny. By the way, all these themes of larger Jupiter-Saturn cycles are outlined in the first chapter of my book, In Search of Destiny. So you can find that there. And also, my article, The Long View of 2024, is at my website for further details on that. But you see here how the water, fire, earth, air dominant cycles are spread out. They're not exactly the same number of years. Typically, water lasts longer, fire goes quicker. We're in the midst of earth now, and then we're going into air. And and then also we see with the red lines and arrows below, you have these, what I call the mutation periods, where you're going to have a little back and forth between different elements before it pretty much sticks to one element, where we have now in earth. So in the water dominant period, you have the strength of, and again, you can see this in my book, In Search of Destiny, where I have annotated timelines and unannotated timelines. So you can, do your own research on that. But in the water period, we have themes that can bring strength and growth to religion. Empires and monarchies are defined by their religious association. They're closely intertwined. Even royal houses are intertwined through bloodlines, but religion must unite them. Remember, this is when we had sea voyages that were undertaken for the glory of the monarchy, but also in most cases to expand Christendom or Islam. So that was water voyages. And then in the fire dominant period, and we see, of course, Jupiter and Saturn are always figured in here, are playing huge roles, because Jupiter is going to be better in water or fire. It rules a water sign, Cancer, and a fire sign, Sagittarius. And notice also down below, I see Sunil has very nicely put a red box around the triple conjunctions. And there you can see, I don't know if you can pull that up a little bit, but I think you've got the whole thing there. Yeah, the latest one out, I think I put, was the one. No, I guess if you do that, then yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, the latest one out is in the 2200s. And so you can see how pivotal those ones were in 4041 and 8081. They just drummed home the point of, in the one case, the invention of more and more powerful weapons, and also more and more powerful information tools. So in the fire dominant period, what we're going to always see is that Jupiter is doing very well in fire and water. This was the nation state building period par excellence. In fact, when we show, I'm going to show in a minute, the fire 4 period, and you'll see what happened at the beginning of that. But this truly was yes, you still have the prominence of religion, but you have the overtly nationalistic aspirations and very patriotic. The fires of national pride were afoot, you pitting nationalistic interests and aspirations against each other, and lighting the fires of national pride, right? And so this was a pivotal period for many nations of the world, certainly the U.S., France, 16, 18 nations in South and Central America came into being, and that was, of course, the colonial empires were being broken apart. So that was a major theme of the fire period. And then you move into the earth period, and you have material security and the ability to for trade and technology and exchange through trade, providing solutions to problems. I mean, it's just amazing how, I mean, things in water, the water period, everything took so long to gestate, whereas in the earth dominant period, you had the ability to, you had a car, I think invented, the first one, I believe, was in like 1885. But the moment the earth period started to take off, actually, the first earth conjunction in September of 21, you suddenly had the ability to mass produce cars. So you had very quickly this amazing technological development, which had the particular characteristics of fire into earth, and then the earth period taking over. So if we could bring that down. Yes. Right. So let us go back to the, if we may, I want to show the water. Let me show the water and then the fire core periods. Let's start with the water core period, because I want to get to making my point around why but this gives you the overview of what you're dealing with in the individual periods. So Sunil, if we could have the water period, the core water, and that's, you'll see it's very strong blue colors. Right. Now notice here, so similar kind of diagram with, this is the core of the water period. Notice there are no anomalies like we had in the earth period. And we have only one set of triple asterisks, and that's in 1682. Otherwise, it's pretty smooth. You'll notice it's going pretty smoothly. No standout, what I've named standout conjunctions. In other words, you have the trend of the religion, royalty, sea voyages, all of this continuing unabated in the core period between 1544 and 1702, 158 period, a year period. So there's no particular major action or tension around the midway point, the juncture halfway into the cycle, because there's no particular strength. There's no standout conjunction at the juncture. Okay, if you could now also show us, and of course, all kinds of historically interesting things could be said about any of these charts, but in the interest of time, since I'm told I have 25 minutes to convey all this, I will move. Let's move to the fire chart, the core of the fire, which is a red. It's a very strong red theme, so easy to spot. Okay, great. So this fire period, notice, has several, actually the early ones, 1782, 1802, 1821, those are all either Vargotama or galactic center, so those are very, very strong, but no particular, there's no standout conjunction at the turning point, the juncture in 1841. So the themes of the fire period continued unabated. Okay, and I will point out to you, and I think it's, again, astrologers are capable of predicting larger and smaller trends because of these types of charts and this ability to see these things. I have yet to see any other astrologer writing about this, but I'm happy to draw it to your attention. In American, of course, I'm an American living in the US. So I will draw your attention to the American Revolution, which, as many of us know, was occurring in 1775, 76. And in fact, many people think it was all over then. We wrote the Declaration of Independence in 1776 and bam, that was it. But no, this went on for 8 years. So that notice the core of the fire period, I believe that was November of 1782. That's in my book. And it wasn't until, I believe it was February of 1783 when King George V announced the cessation of hostilities. So in my mind, as an astrologer, this Revolutionary War, U.S. against Britain, was not going to be finished until this turning point of this very, very pivotal Jupiter-Saturn conjunction at the galactic center in 1782. So that right there is a very powerful history lesson. Okay. Now, there were some, you could argue that there were some push-pull points. I believe it was about the expansion of the U.S. Should we expand or should we not? And that was around in the presidencies of around the 1841 period. But it pretty much, you know, Sagittarius, of course, is a very expansive sign. It is the ascendant of the USA chart that I use, which was established by James Kelleher with his research. I think that chart works incredibly well. It's July 4th, 1776, 6:30 p.m., Philadelphia. It's an 859 Sagittarius ascendant. And so it just makes a lot of sense that Sagittarius would be a major theme. And notice the pivotal, the first, middle, and last conjunctions of this core fire period. They're all in Sagittarius. Okay, Sunil, if you give us now, we'll go back to the Earth core period and focus on that. Great, thank you. So now you brought up the fact that we were together back at Sivananda Murthy's incredible conference, mundane conference back in 2010. I was talking about a lot of these things then, and I was talking about the corporate conglomerates. I think I'm trying to remember the exact title of my talk was corporate, yes, so very similar themes. I've been looking at this for some years. The title of my talk, 14 years ago almost, was Corporate Conglomerates versus the Nation States. Which nation states will survive and thrive? And what I didn't, of course, we understand more and more, and astrologers who want to do mundane astrology should really study geopolitics because there's so much to know and understand. And of course, you have to know deeply the mundane meanings of Jupiter and Saturn. And Jupiter is in mundane terms, is humanitarian and ethical concerns, law and lawyers, religion and its leaders, education, especially higher education, teachers, journalism, and all that. Whereas Saturn is going to be business, and in Capricorn, it is the king of business, the consolidation of material resources and the powers, material security, and weapons of defense. Democracy, it's classically defined as, we've lost that chart on the screen there. Thank you. The problem is that in Capricorn, democracy can be bought, and we're seeing that all too much, with these machines and all kinds of questions about the integrity of elections that have occurred more and more. Of course, the 1960 election was disputed. So here we have, and of course, the 2020 election was hotly disputed. And you know something's up when the mainstream media won't allow you to discuss it. A lot of suppression of information, censorship, all of this has come in. Really ashamedly so in a supposed democratic country, or a constitutional republic is really what we have. So here we have, and I'm going to point out to you, and what I understand as we move on, we're right in the thick of this right now, of course. And I've got to say, I expected more as we approach 2020. And you can see I designed this graph in 2019 and had thought that we would see the shift in 2020, but I was too early. And what I have been predicting, we'll see if I'm correct, is that due to the strength of this standout conjunction at 2020, December, that and assuming that the trends up to now, which I have defined as globalism versus nationalism, and I've also defined that in my 2010 talk, because you have, with the strength of Saturn, you have businesses, corporate conglomerates that are, of course, wealthier and more powerful. They have more clout than nation states. And that is exactly what they want, because they consider that the citizens are inconvenient. They do not want citizens to give their input. So these are the themes of globalism that remained hidden for a while. Now they're absolutely blatant. If you care to study the Agenda 2021 was the first one. And by the way, looking at a Saturn cycle of 28, 29 years, those of you who want to search this, the first major overt international display, shall we say, of a globalist agenda was at the UN Earth Summit in June of 1992. So that's 28 years before the 2020 conjunction. So they intended for certain results to come by 2020, and that was the Agenda 2021. So look what we had in 2020. We had the first major event in the world where a small group of unelected elites dictated the health and business government policies of hundreds and hundreds of nations. So that was the COVID debacle. Okay. So that was 2020. So, I mean, this is the more you examine this year and the years around it. And I will also draw your attention to a couple of events. We can't go into all of them. But I think if we look at least 5 years around 2020, and now we're in the last period of that, right? Thank you, Sunil. This is great graphics help. In 2015, we had, and I remember at the time drawing attention to it, and I got very little feedback. People were saying, "Oh, typically, well, that's not much will happen with that. They're not really going to do that." And what I'm referring to is the UN's, the United Nations Global Compact on, now, I think they just called it Global Compact on Migration, but basically what it was and is an edict of unlimited mass migration to every nation around the world. And this was established in 2015 and signed by many nations, believe it or not, in 2018. Donald Trump did not sign it. But when he lost, in quotes, the election of 2020, Biden very quickly signed it. Biden is a globalist, and the Democrats largely are globalists. And many of those inside the U.S. who happen to be either Democrats or Republicans, who are fine with pushing jobs and opportunities outside of the United States, as long as they make good money, it doesn't matter. In other words, this is another unfortunate trait of the Earth period, is that anyone can be bought. And we see this with scientists, with doctors, with where we have opinions on very important matters that affect the world. People are being bought off. So And the other event, if I were to choose two events in 2015 that epitomized some of the major globalist and anti-globalist, pro-nationalist statements, I would say that Donald Trump's trip down the elevator at Trump Tower with Melania to announce his candidacy for president of the United States. Trump, of course, has been the major leader of the nation states in the West of the U.S. because, and not to sound, U.S. centric, but I think it's no secret that the U.S. is the biggest prize the globalists want, and that's why, and Biden has basically allowed millions and millions. We don't know how many. That's the count has been lost. It's like, who knows, 20, 30 million since the beginning of his regime have flooded into the United States and have been flown in on the taxpayers' dime. So we have a very untenable situation now in the U.S. and a lot of military-age men, a lot of, how should we say, well, mental institutions having released people and also, outright criminals. So we've had an increase in crime and all of that. So we have a very chaotic, potentially very potentially out of control situation. That's all of this centered around the year 2020 and what happened that year in the U.S. election. And so the election of 2024 in the U.S. is historic, because they always say it's historical. This one is a historical because if Trump does not win this, and I have projected that he will, Biden has already stepped out as of yesterday. So they will have to cheat in order to win it. And in my opinion, they cheated to win the last one. There's no way they could have won it otherwise. And if a nationalist does not win this election in the U.S., then you basically have the crumbling of the whole U.S. constitutional republic. I mean, it's that dire. It's that dire, and many people recognize that. So, and also you have around the world, and I'll just finish with this comment, and I think we have just a few minutes left for questions, and that is that 2024 is, historically, it's the first year, I think, in history where you have over half the world having elections, including the European Parliament. So, and also it's a solar maximum year. And they speeded it up. They said, oh, actually, it's arriving even earlier than we expected. A lot of it's in 24 and maybe early 25. Yeah, just in time for our election. So, Sunil, I know I've probably run my 25 minutes. So if anybody has any questions on any of this.
Any questions, anybody? Please put it in the chat box. Or you can raise your hand, whichever is comfortable.
Somebody's written mass migration to counter nationalism. It's a little bit of a cryptic phrase. I'm not sure whether that was a question, but basically the way I think most nationalists see that mass unlimited, they immediately, and this is, I think, a fault of liberals to say that this is xenophobic. No, it's not xenophobic, because basically you're not against immigration. You're against unlimited mass migration, which you got people living in airports and hotels, and they're getting treated better than our veterans living under, a bridge in some cases where, excuse me, you have the immigrants getting all kinds of handouts and credit cards and things. Anyway, the point is, my major point is that you don't you keep your sovereignty by having your borders. So your personal sovereignty, your national sovereignty. So sorry, I don't even know if that was a question, but I thought I saw that comment there. Thank you for some of the comments there.
Venkateshwaran Ramasubbu is saying great lecture. Thanks, Mr. Venkateshwaran.
Thank you. Thanks for those nice comments. Yeah, no, I would love if anybody is sharing. As I haven't, I welcome any input. So far, no one has written to me and said, I've been looking into this and I find this, this, and this. Somebody saying only Jupiter and Saturn. Oh, there are plenty of other things to see. Of course, Pluto is at a return in the US. It's just that, I came from Western tropical astrology, where I was doing the Uranian system where they have 8 extra planets and there's thousands of asteroids. And I guess I was so happy to narrow things down to the classic. And I do use Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, by the way. But I tend to watch them when they're very close to something. So if they're within 3 degrees and closer, the better. Yes, the Pluto return to the US chart is in the second house of finance. Yeah, it's very, very significant. There's so many you could do, but look at what we've got to work with this. And you can take it out to a larger cycle. So anyway, good point. But I think something is gained by narrowing things down. And I learned that by starting way out and seeing what the banquet of planetary options were. So I don't know if there are any other questions, but I appreciate all the comments so far.
One comment from Ishan. He has, I had a question. Are we going towards dissolving of global powers in the Pisces phase when we are going from Capricorn to Virgo from 2020 to 2040? Or we are just looking at specific conjunction points and not the linear signs phase?
So he's talking about the age of Pisces or something like that. He's not talking about the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions.
Ishan, do you want to come on camera and just rephrase your question more properly? Ishan,
what about what was one currency? What will happen? Oh, I don't think there'll ever be one currency. But and by the way, the Federal Reserve, I do have the chart for the Federal Reserve, and they have, I'm sure you're all familiar with the Bindu points. Jupiter in Taurus is 0 bindus for the Federal Reserve, and Saturn in Aquarius is 0 bindus. And I know there are those in the Trump team who would love to dismantle the Federal Reserve. They're very anti-constitutional, but I don't know if any of you are familiar with all of that. There's a wonderful book by Edward Griffin called The Secret of Jekyll Island, and that tells all about the Federal Reserve and how it has been a globalist entity. There are a lot of globalist entities. One of the major ones came in 1921, 6 weeks before the first Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Virgo, and that was the Council on Foreign Relations. If any of you are familiar with that. The person who asked that question, I can sort of piece together what he's asking. And I think it's important to see that we're in the midst of the Earth core cycle. And that that's why I pointed out the water and the fire periods, because they just continued unabated with the trends. And if we had no shift, we would continue as well. And back in 2010, I wasn't really studying that yet. I hadn't really, you know, you progress. So let's put it that way. You develop and you progress. So I started observing that fact. And I began to realize that if you have extreme trends that have gotten out of control, in this case, the globalists, they basically want, it's no secret, they want major depopulation and to control the world. So I would call that a very extreme anti-godlike. I mean, this is where, and much could be said about the Graha Yuddha, the planetary war that is created with Jupiter, Saturn. And this is another factor, by the way, when you had, and this is the power of that Jupiter, Saturn, Vargotama conjunction in 1961, because since then you've had the diminishment of religion and God certainly in the U.S. schools. I mean, our nation was founded on biblical principles. The whole Constitution, there's more references to the Bible than any other source. A whole study has been done on this. So when people say, oh, why do they have to bring up God? Well, our whole nation was founded on God. So, and I see this coming back, actually. Just, in fact, recently, July 13th, I'm sure you're aware, that the GOP candidate Donald Trump was almost killed, and many just see that as divine intervention. They've tried to kill him off. They've tried to eliminate him on the ballot. They've tried to bankrupt him. They've tried to put him in prison. And I mean, if you don't think this is the globalists trying to defeat their enemy and their chief enemy in terms of an actual person and leader of a movement is Donald Trump. So I was quite struck the other day. People are starting to talk more openly about God. There was even, I'll just mention it because as astrologers, we love nimitas, right? Donald Trump and Melania were just leaving Pennsylvania after his life having been spared. And they're on the takeoff, they're on the runway. And the air traffic control person, and I don't have the exact verse, but as they're taking off, they're being cleared for takeoff, he quotes a verse from the Bible and blesses them on their way. I mean, so something sacred is coming back into the culture. There are those who are blatantly trying to remove it. We have Satanism alive and well. We have Marxism alive and well in the U.S. And as astrologers, we know we're in a sacred science. So I don't think we're likely to see a Satanist among us, but you never know. So I was just very struck by that moment, and by the fact that we are living proof. The United States is living proof of a constitutional republic that is founded on biblical principles. And we have been pushed off of that for 60 years. And astrologically, a lot of that is this Vargotama Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. The one in 2020 is in the second Navamsha of Capricorn. So it moves into Aquarius, where Jupiter is no longer debilitated. So I consider that important, and I consider that another, it by itself, if it were not a standout conjunction, it wouldn't be enough, but it adds to the picture. And that's my thesis. I believe it's my original thesis. We'll see if I'm right. I hope I'm right, because it's not going to be good for humanity if the globalists win, because they do not have good things in mind for us. I'd like to end on a more hopeful note, but I think my prediction is hopeful. That the globalists will be defeated, is what I've been predicting for several years.